and there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another tremendous installment from very high above all the puerile and insipid forms of Wyoming mainstream media. This is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy chilly Thursday. You know, it never ceases to amaze me during Wyoming spring. It's 75, 80 degrees one day, and the very next day it starts snowing. When I got to the studio this morning, hopped out of the car, it was spitting snow. And I suppose we should all be happy for that because we haven't had a lot of snow this winter. And typically, Wyoming springs are where we get a lot of the snow, at least the real heavy, wet snow. But I got to tell you, man, like riding around the motorcycle yesterday, kind of disappointed when there's snow this morning.
Riding around on my little old bike.
Yeah, well, no, that's, by the way, did you hear that Christy Haswell has decided to run for re-election as a Sheridan County Commissioner?
Really?
That is what I heard.
I thought she was stick a fork in her.
Well, I thought so too. But look at it this way, Ken. We're going to have an entire summer where we can listen to Riding Around in My Automobile.
Yeah, it's almost like getting Henderson back.
It almost is.
It almost is. By the way, you're welcome.
What am I welcome for?
One of the things about being the techie sound guy is that when you do your job right, nobody even notices you.
Well, I mean...
and I got through the opening sequence, and I think I hit all the cues when I was supposed to.
Well, it's a dramatic improvement.
It is, and you're welcome.
Well, I have to tell you, Ken, not to create a self-admiration society here, but I do miss you when you're gone.
It's too late.
It is. It's my show. Anyway, my friends, welcome to the program. We've got another big show for you today. Gubernatorial candidate Brent is going to be joining us at the top of the second hour. A lot of stuff happening in the governor's race over the last couple of days, and so it was fortuitous that we got Brent to come in the studio, sit down, and have a conversation about it. And that leads me directly to probably the top story in Wyoming politics right now, is that Representative Harriet Hageman has endorsed Megan Degenfelder for governor. First to the cow pie, and then we'll talk about it. And I quote, Superintendent of Public Instruction Megan Degenfelder, or Megan Felder, as I saw it online yesterday, scored another big endorsement for governor on Wednesday when U.S. Representative Harriet Hageman announced her support. In a Wednesday afternoon statement, the Congresswoman said that she and Degenfelder have spent countless hours discussing the superintendent's vision for Wyoming, and that Degenfelder is a proven winner with a strong conservative record. I beg to differ.
I was just going to say, okay, proven winner.
Winner.
Show me one thing.
One solitary conservative thing that Megan Degenfelder has done. Now, I'll give it to her. She is a nice enough person to talk to. She's, pleasant to be around. But name me one conservative thing that she has done.
She said a few conservative things early on, and
They all do, Ken.
yeah, I know. I don't remember what she said, but I know it kind of surprised me that she would say that. But
Okay, now, just to play devil's advocate here a little bit, that politicians change over time. Most of them do. My favorite politicians do not change. They're the same people that they were the very first time that I met them.
I do change clothes.
Well, sometimes. Not hats, though. Not hats. Well, that's not even true.
That's not true. I've worn at least 6 hats in the last 2 days.
And actually, you may not know this about Agent 29, but he does have a fabulous hat collection. He's the only guy I've ever seen that I know of that can actually pull off a top hat.
Yeah.
It was he wore one at my wedding. It was
You just have to own it.
Yeah, well, I mean, you would have to wearing a hat like that. I mean,
I think of Ben Rumson in Paint Your Wagon.
that's such a great movie.
He wore a top hat everywhere, and it looked natural. You didn't think anything of it. And
Yeah.
So I think when you wear that, or I've got several derbies, you wear one of those that's a little out of the unknown. Even the fedora, you just what's
Yeah.
different?
Yeah, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
But this is not the case with Megan Degenfelder. She has not been good.
I've never seen her wear a hat.
Well, there's a couple of videos of her online wearing a hat.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but the hat I'm talking about is the proverbial one that over her entire, political history, she really hasn't changed hats at all, except for the one that she wears in photo ops. And by that, I mean that really Degenfelder has been sometimes at best middle of the road. Now, if you look back at the slip board votes that she's made, which is really the only voting record we have for her, it's almost entirely right in line with Governor Gordon. Now, to be fair, there have been a few votes that she and the governor have differed on. As Secretary Gray mentioned yesterday, there were some votes that they were able to get a majority. By they, I mean Chuck Gray, Christy Racinas, and Megan Degenfelder voted together several times recently. But if you look over the 4-year span,
Recently. What
yeah.
has changed recently?
She's running for governor. Let me
There you
give you
go.
another one. There has been a gigantic controversy. Controversy is the wrong word. Scandal is a better word concerning the school boards in Sweetwater County, namely Rock Springs. And there have been a lot of complaints that have been filed against the school board and various other people. And for the better part of 2 years, parents in Sweetwater County have been trying to get Superintendent Degenfelder to do something. Well, there wasn't anything done. By anything, I mean anything, substantive. And we might even make an argument that what is being done now is not substantive. But anyway, nothing had been done until after there was an announcement for governor. And so that is what's changed. And the political calculus, so this is the way I've got it figured out anyway. Eric Barlow is Governor Gordon 3.0. I would say 2.0, but I think he'd actually be worse than Governor Gordon. Eric Barlow's history in the entire time he's been in the legislature has been voting with the Democrat Party 85% of the time. My friends, if you are 85% of anything, it kind of means that you're that thing. And when it comes to Eric Barlow, he's definitely a very, very liberal guy. We've got a piece coming out on the Open Range Record that I should have it published today, I think, about Eric Barlow's history, and it's not a good one. Before he ran for the state legislature, he was a very, very radical guy. And I think to some degree, he is probably still that radical guy. Let us not forget that it was Eric Barlow, it's been only Eric Barlow, who has successfully written gun control into Wyoming law in the last, I don't know, Ken, would you say decade?
I don't know ever.
It's been a long time.
Other than just the generic crap, because to me, any gun law is a problem.
Yeah, any gun law is a problem.
Because it's all a fallacy. You hide behind the idea that somehow some bad guy is going to obey a rule.
Exactly.
And
it never works. So let me fill you in on what we're referring to. His Restoration of Rights bill. Prior to that bill, there was no felon in possession of a firearm statute in Wyoming. And that's not to say that people who were not felons didn't get prosecuted, but here's what would happen. The cops pull this guy over, find out he's a felon, search his car. Oops, there's a gun there. It wasn't Wyoming that prosecuted him. It was always handed off to the feds for prosecution. Well, post so-called restoration of rights bill, now in Wyoming law, we have a felon in possession of a firearm statute. The thinking being is that you can't give something back that Wyoming never took away. And as it turns out, Wyoming couldn't give gun rights back anyway because it's a federal law. If you're a felon, you cannot be in possession of a firearm. So anyway, that's just one example of Eric Barlow getting legislation passed and claiming that it's somehow conservative. The truth is, there were, the last number I was told, 1,200 people that were issued certificates of restoration of rights. The actual certificate said, hey, you can get your guns back. And that's not far off the exact language that was on the certificates. And then Randy Kane gets raided in Bighorn. And then we discover, the state of Wyoming cannot give you your gun rights back. And by the way, they still do not have his guns back, nor his girlfriend.
His girlfriend, yeah. And that's not a surprise because we talked about that when that bill was coming around and said, you know, we got so many issues. So then the SAPA thing would have prevented or fixed that.
Yeah, if they would have prosecuted it, which is the failing of the first SAPA law.
Yeah, if we'd have fixed the SAPA bill as we tried to do and as the law enforcement railed against us for trying to do. So
there's a lot of
left
things
undone.
Yeah. So anyway, that's Eric Barlow. Now, if you look at Megan Degenfelder, again, there is not a single conservative thing that I can think of. And I was up early this morning doing show prep, knowing that we were going to talk about the Harriet endorsement and trying to come up with a conservative thing that Degenfelder has done. And I can't come up with one.
That would be a good question for Harriet when we have her back.
Absolutely. I'm definitely going to have to ask her about that. Really, the 4-year history of Superintendent Degenfelder really has been kind of just motoring along, like not really doing anything.
I think, and this is kind of a hard subject to broach, but recently at a forum, one of my colleagues was challenged on a vote, and you can never straddle the fence.
Nope.
You have to get in, get over, or get run over. And I've always been the kind of person that says, if I'm in, I'm in.
Right.
Take the Freedom Caucus, for example.
You're definitely in.
And people will write me and say, you were so stupid for doing that. And I just say, I stop. Okay. What has the Freedom Caucus ever done that has gone against the Republican platform? Or have they taken a position that you disagree with? And nobody has ever been able to answer that. They say, but it's the Freedom Caucus and this and this, and they start parroting all of the things that the press has said. And people are afraid of that. People are afraid of being labeled, and so they don't want to stand up and say, yeah, I stand do. But the ones that don't make it more difficult. If everybody just stood up together and said, yeah,
I have
you should be too.
There you go.
Yeah.
It wasn't that long ago that you and I had the conversation that the response to all of this anti-Freedom Caucus stuff is pretty simple. Yes, I am. Why aren't you? Tell me exactly what is wrong. What have we done?
Show me one thing where we violated the Republican platform. But my point is very similar to what's going on with Brent and endorsements for Brent. There are a lot of people that just feel there's no way he can win. Well, you know what? If we all got solidly behind him, he just might.
Well, and that's and before the show today, and I should let you in on a little behind the scenes stuff here. And I'm sure every talk show.
No, keep me in the dark.
I'm sure every talk show works this way. That before we actually go on the air, you have a conversation about what we're going to talk about. And Ken and I this morning was, well, wait a minute. This isn't even April yet. We're at the end of March, and whether you realize it or not, August is a long time from here, from now.
Yeah,
And
beware.
yeah, beware, Rod Miller and his 18, 26, or whatever it is. But, how many elections have turned on a last minute event? Something that comes out of the closet or gets dug up,
Or someone that
or
comes out of the
someone that comes out of the closet, whatever. But that's where the term October surprise comes from. That there have been a lot of elections that have turned the opposite direction because of one revelation a month before
We
the
need a
election.
July surprise.
Yeah, well,
It could happen.
it could happen. Politicians do weird stuff. And a lot of, some people run for office when they really should have kept all that stuff hidden away and not put it out for public
Yeah,
view.
that's one thing. And I don't think I have any skeletons in the closet, but all of us have things that we've done in the past, especially when
Sure.
you get to be in your 60s, and you would just really rather that never come up.
I'm really glad there were no cell phones when I was in college.
Well,
there were cell phones, just not these.
no, we didn't.
Just really happy.
We had a couple of tomato cans and a long string.
Smoke
Anyway.
signals.
Anyway,
But my point is that August is a long time away, and a lot of things can happen.
yeah,
There's a lot of town halls. There's a lot of interactions that are gonna take place, and you never know what's going to happen. And so, making a decision this early, this far out from the election, well, I don't know that it's a wise decision. I know I wouldn't
well,
endorse somebody
we
this late.
often argue against early voting because of that very thing. Is you just
Exactly.
give yourself as much time as possible to make sure you have all the facts and actually try to get the facts. That's where I'm at with the Freedom Caucus thing. There are so many people that have bought in to the press's narrative, and rather than fight it, they succumb to that.
Just kinda
Okay,
give in to
it
it.
wasn't worth the effort, and it is relentless.
Yes.
It is. But when we stand together, and we speak the facts and we speak the truth, I think God rewards that. When I do better in my campaigns when I just come out, this is who I am, take it or leave it.
Well, that's who you are, and that's
Yeah.
why I said that there are only a few politicians that have not changed. Ken is one of those. I mean, he's the same guy that I met 6 years ago when we were trying to figure out how to run a podcast. But if you're not in possession of all the facts, you don't really know what's going to happen, who that person is. There's a lot of things that politicians do in the past to get elected that when they come to light, maybe those things would be better off not in the public view. And so you don't know.
Maybe you're a newspaper person with an attitude that you and I kind of like, and you think, well, this is somebody we can work with, and all of a sudden you find out you don't even know who she is.
Yeah, exactly right.
It could happen.
Yeah, you never know when a con woman is going to crop up, and her name might be Marie Hamilton. Who knows? That's just my opinion, of course. But in being in possession of a lot of the facts, Anyway, now recently there has been a lot of discussion online about whether celebrity endorsements matter. A lot of people, most people, get their news from social media, X, Facebook, those sorts of things. And when they see, a high-profile name crop up that says, well, I'm going to support this person or that person. The question is, do those endorsements matter? And I think if you look at the previous presidential election, we should probably conclude that they don't. How many celebrities were out there endorsing Kamala Harris? A whole bunch of them, including some people that have started a PAC, maybe a couple of lawyers in Casper that call themselves Common Sense Republicans for Wyoming. Maybe you should have done a little bit of social media research yourself before starting that, because turns out they're in that group. But the point is, and I just Googled, do celebrity endorsements matter? And here's one from CBS News. And it says, let's see here. Let me scroll down. look at Taylor Swift, right? So she's got arguably one of the biggest audiences in the world. Okay, we don't like her.
I don't mind looking at her. I just don't want to listen to her.
See, and I don't even think she's that attractive. But
Well, that's because you're hooked on Sweeney.
that's true. I am hooked on Sweeney. But this whole piece from CBS News says even though Taylor Swift, made some endorsements, that didn't really matter. The candidate still lost. So the question is, do endorsements matter? And that's one of the questions I'm going to ask Brent when he comes in.
Well, yeah, part of the question there is, okay, Taylor Swift endorses you, big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Chuck Norris endorses you, especially now.
Yeah, that might be it.
Chuck Norris comes out and endorses somebody, which he could do.
That's true.
He's Chuck Norris.
Chuck Norris isn't scared of the dark. The dark is scared of Chuck Norris.
He's not scared of death.
So anyway, the big question today is, do endorsements really matter? Now, if we look at the other people that are running for governor, you've got Gabriel Green here in Sheridan, which we're still not sure that he's qualified to run for governor. I'm still looking into that one. There's Joseph Kibler, who I enjoyed having on the program, but he's switched parties so many times that I don't know which party he's a member of now. Independent candidates typically do not do very well in Wyoming politics. So really, you've got three people that are, legitimately in the race for governor. Eric Barlow, Megan Degenfelder, and Brent Bean.
And that's what's frustrating to me, because there's always this idea about splitting the vote.
Yeah.
In my view, if everybody got behind Brent, they split the vote, and Brent has a great chance.
So that's an interesting discussion, because as I just laid out, Eric Barlow, he's on the far left. He will get the big-time Rhino and Democrat vote. The Democrats won't matter because this thing will be over in the primary. But he's going to get the left vote. Now, Degenfelder, just being who she is, she'll take some of that left vote away from Barlow, and she'll get some people that are on the right, which I think that's obvious given the endorsements that happened yesterday. The question is, are there enough people on the right to elect Brent Bean?
No.
I would argue not right now.
Yeah.
But there again, there's a long time until the primary election.
Yeah, and that's the next point. There's a lot of things that could happen. I pray for things to happen. And I'm not saying that Brent can't win. I think that he's going to underpoll. People will point to polls that are out there, but I think he's going to underpoll because the type of people that are solidly in his camp, I don't think are the type of people that would respond to polls.
No, I don't think that they are.
And I happen to be one of them.
And if you just look at this program. So this program has great numbers. Roughly 70,000 people a month watch this show. Okay, well, rarely does anything that we do on this show crop up in the drive-by media because they just try to ignore it. But the truth is, there's a lot of people that pay attention to Cowboy State Politics, both the podcast and this program. And a lot of those people are the folks that are more likely than not going to vote with Brent Bean. And they're also the same type of people that are solidly behind Trump. And we all know that the polls really didn't reflect Trump's performance in either election.
To me, there's another factor. And we've talked a little bit about this too, is as a lot of us sit around and strategize and plan and scheme and if this, then this. I'm a little simpler. I'm not very good at that strategy.
Well, ain't that the truth? I just can't.
And so I just try to do what I think is the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, there's no question.
Right.
So I'm going to go do that, leave the rest in God's hands. And that's why I say Brent always stands a chance. I mean, you look at the Old Testament, and I want you to go down against the Philistines, but I only want you to take 12 people and some flugelhorns. What? So then it comes up that, and this is the way God does it, comes up the only possible way it could have happened was through God's intervention. And that's how the Freedom Caucus got the House, I believe.
Oh, I would say.
And so where is our faith when we turn around and say, we start leaning not on your own understanding?
Well, and the other, yes, you're right. The other part of this, too, is I don't know that there's been a lot of polling that's been done. We can ask Brent when he gets here. I'm sure that there's been some internal polling, but I haven't seen anything that says 40% support this candidate.
Yeah, I have no idea if Brent's able to do any polling or not. But if he does, I doubt. We'll have to ask him. I doubt he would necessarily believe the results.
Well, and let's take a different race. So, Secretary of State's race, 4 years ago, you had Slithers Nethercott and Chuck Gray. Slithers very much did the typical establishment candidate campaigning, high profile stuff. Okay, she was in a parade here or there. Chuck Gray, yeah, he did all of those things, but he also held town halls just about everywhere. I mean, during the election, it was not hard to find Chuck Gray.
And that's what Brent's doing. He's out there every night, and he's going to all of these places that the flyover candidates, if I can use that,
sure,
they don't go there.
Well, no, because, they're entitled, right? And think about it this way. If you're the candidate that has a Trump endorsement and now you have a Harriet endorsement, there's a pretty good bet that you stand a good chance, right?
Yeah. You get to the top of the hill, you kick her into neutral and cruise down there.
Sure. So why would you spend time going to, this town hall or that town hall? I know of a group here in Sheridan that has invited Megan Degenfelder multiple times, and they haven't even got a single response from her campaign. Now, if you try to get a hold of Brent's campaign, easy peasy chicken squeezy, man. You'll be talking to 4 or 5 different people, which we could talk about the effectiveness of that.
Do those 4 or 5 people talk to each other?
You never know. But I think there's still a lot of questions, and I'm not convinced that endorsements matter. And when we come back from the break, I want to talk about maybe the reverse effect of endorsements. I think that's worthy of discussion. So we'll do that next. Yeah, I know. The weather seems to be toying with us. 60 one day, 42 the next, and pretty soon, my friends, those 6s and 4s are going to turn into 3s and 2s. Though we all want to avoid it, that white stuff is coming, my friends, and you will be shoveling the walk in it. It's cold, it's unpleasant, and nobody likes to do it. But you could make it just a little bit more comfortable and prevent your feet from turning into a giant block of ice. In fact, you could keep them nice and warm and toasty, and your toes will never even know that they're outside. The rest of you may be frozen solid, but at least your feet won't be. To make all this happen, you just need a pair of socks from the Buffalo Wool Company. They are the finest socks that I've ever put on my feet. To get you a pair, go to their website, thebuffalowoolco.com. Trust me, you won't be disappointed. Are you one of those guys that listen to the president just a little bit too closely and now you're tired of winning? Are you getting the feeling that there's been way too many good things happening in our country and you just can't take it anymore? Well, if you are, and you think you should follow Rosie O'Donnell's example and get the heck out of Dodge, you need to call Rebecca Bextel at eXp Realty. She'll make those foreign country living ideas a reality for you. All you have to do is call 307-699-3519, and she'll make sure some freedom-loving, red-blooded American will now live in the home that you no longer want. If you want to sell your house, or if you want to buy one that's way better than the house you have right now, give Rebecca a call. Again, her phone number is 307-699-3519.
I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day, don't you? Well, I can show you how. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way.
Cowboy State Politics is only getting stronger. This program is expanding faster than a supernova. No, all right. So it's not expanding faster than a supernova, but it's close. It might be close. Welcome back to the program. Cowboy State Politics Live on a Thursday.
Definitive hyperbole.
The definitive hyperbole that ever existed. There's more hyperbole for you. Welcome back to the show. We've got a great program lined up for you for the rest of today. Make sure you don't miss it. We've got Brent being that should be here, I'd say in the next 20 minutes or so. I told him to show up a little bit early. You never know with that guy. But he'll be here. So where we left off was endorsements. And the next question, I think, is could endorsements have a reverse effect for the person making the endorsement? So let's say that you endorse a candidate early and something bad happens in the election. Does that have an effect on you, the person giving the endorsement? And I think that sometimes it can. But you may not see it until later. What do you think, Ken? You're the politician. You tell me.
A lot of people avoid making endorsements just for that reason, and things beyond your control. And you could take my friend Bill, for example. You could see how that could possibly turn a little bit. But I endorsed Chuck, and I endorsed him pretty early. And I endorsed him because he and I have been friends for about 6 years now.
Sure.
And I trust him, and I know where he's coming from.
I think that's a pretty safe bet,
and there's
too.
Yeah, and there's a certain degree of loyalty there that has to be. Would I step out and endorse somebody that I don't know?
No.
I don't see me doing that. I made an endorsement for House 29, and James I've seen enough to feel very comfortable.
Yeah, I really like James
with that. Had enough. I don't want to use the word intimate, but close conversations that I feel very comfortable in that, and I feel like I know who he is. But who knows what may have happened in James past 25 years ago?
You never know.
Maybe there was some bad arrest or something. No, don't run out to the press.
I've always said,
but something like that could happen.
Now, Ken, I have a theory here, and let me just bounce this off of you. I think if a candidate, had some maybe questionable stuff in their past, maybe there's a DUI or, maybe a rough divorce somewhere.
An ex-husband.
A mean ex-husband or something, whatever. But there was something in the past that might be politically perilous. Now, I think if a candidate came out and said, okay, I'm going to run for office, but I'm going to give you a list of things that I've done, and so it's out in the open, and we can talk about it right now. And just say, I had this DUI arrest, 20 years ago or whatever. By the way, my divorce wasn't great. I think that if a candidate came out and just was completely honest about all of it.
Where do you find somebody who's completely honest?
Well, okay, so there's a good point. But here's my thinking, right?
Wait a minute.
Hey, it's Brent.
I see one.
We'll ask him here in just about. Let me just finish my thought here, though.
Yeah.
So I think that if a candidate came out and said, look, here's all the bad stuff that's in my past, and let's talk about it. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. And then even if a reporter said, yeah, but you didn't mention this one, the candidate could say, oh, oops, I forgot about that one. Let's talk about it right now. I think that if everything is out in the open, there's no surprises.
Sometimes it's not even up to you. Before I ever announced as a candidate, Wildfile did that hit piece on me, what they thought was a hit piece, and exposed my Oath Keeper's background.
Yeah. That was a fun episode.
Speaking of fun.
All right, so a little bit early, but Ken, you want to get his microphone ready to go there?
No.
So we've been talking about the governor's race. Get him off the screen for a minute. There we go.
I'm just so relieved to have a different camera angle.
Yeah, well, you're happy about it. All right, so anyway, we're talking about endorsements and governor candidates and all sorts of candidates, and my thinking is, I don't know that endorsements really matter that much. And the case in point, I think I'd point to at the expense of my business partner. She was running for chairman of the Wyoming GOP, and Harriet endorsed Rebecca, and it didn't really matter all that much. Rebecca lost only by 6 votes, and I would argue there's some other things going on there, but still, there's an endorsement that didn't work. Also, it was Megan Degenfelder who beat Brian Schrader. Brian Schrader had a Trump endorsement, and he still lost. And so I guess my point is that while I think that endorsements matter to some degree, I don't know what degree that is. Ultimately, it's up to the candidate. Like if you're a rock solid candidate and you're doing all the work, all the legwork, and you're doing town halls everywhere, and then somebody with the stature of, say, I don't know, Harriet or John Barrasso, or maybe John Barrasso may not help, but anyway, if you get a nice endorsement and you're doing all the work, well, then we often credit the person making the endorsement for that boost, when in reality it was probably hitting every coffee shop and a diner in the state. So I don't think that it's a done deal. I think we've got a lot of evidence that sometimes those endorsements don't really do too much. But anyway, we're going to talk to a guy that is running for governor, Brent Bean. Brent, welcome to the program.
Dave, good to be here. Good to be here. You too, Ken.
Well, I'm glad we could finally get this all scheduled. So it's been a super long time. In fact, 4 years since you've been on the show.
That's right.
So why don't you give my audience just give us the 2-minute version of who Brent Bean is?
Well, the Brent Bean is, I'm a Wyoming native, graduate of University of Wyoming Engineering College, United States Naval War College, retired Marine Corps colonel, aviator, combat veteran. Been married for 29 years, almost 30 actually, and raised 3 wonderful daughters. And, I have seen the end state of tyranny. I see what's going on in this nation, and I see how quickly people are willing to give up their liberty. I do not like the path of our state. I think that what's going on is, we've seen that our state's being sold out to the highest bidder by politicians that lack the moral courage to defend our constitutional liberties and protect our state from corporate takeover. Taxpayer abuse is rampant. Spending is out of control. And my objective is to return principled conservative leadership, accountability, and discipline to Cheyenne, but first putting the people first. And of course, I need the help of every warrior patriot out there to return Wyoming to the people. That's taxes to the taxpayer, education to the parents, elections to the voters, agriculture to the growers, and of course, energy to Wyoming. And so it's going to take all of us to make it work.
Have you ever said that before?
No, I'm just guessing. I once had a campaign consultant type tell me that you practice your stump speech until you're sick of it and you can't stand it, and at that point you've only just begun.
Well, until your wife is.
Fair enough. All right, so a couple of questions. Let's just hit the nail on the head. And by the way, your supporters are going to be very angry at you because I told them it was going to be 9 o'clock.
Okay.
And we're a little bit early, so you're going to have to stick around,
You bet.
you're going to have them all mad at you. So let's hit the nail on the head.
All right.
Does Harriet endorsing your opponent matter? What do you think about that?
No,
talk to me.
I don't think it does. I think, this, I tell you, this is truly a grassroots campaign. My entire campaign is, and we've got an organization that's just unbelievable. I've only read about these kind of things, and it keeps growing in each county. We have a coordinator out there in each one, plus multiple assistant coordinators, and they're loyal to the cause. I think they've seen what's gone on, and throughout the state, and they're sick of it. They want a change, and these people are just incredible folks. I mean, they really, really are. So no, I don't think it does.
Okay. So how many, I know you've been traveling the state.
Yeah.
It's like, I just watching you on social media. He's in Pinedale today and then he's in Gillette tomorrow. It just seems like you're everywhere. So on average in a given week, how many places are you hitting?
Oh man. I'd say we're hitting, it's tough to say that, I'm doing, anywhere between 3 and 6 events in a day. And this, when I say an event, that may be hitting, hitting a small business, several small businesses, hitting the landfill in Johnson County, those kind of things.
Hey,
And
I used to hang out with trash there.
yeah,
It's okay.
that's right. And then, of course, the culmination is typically a town hall or a meet and greet in the evening. And it's hard to say. I'm out typically 5 days, and then I'll go back to Cody for a couple of days, do the laundry, and then head out for another 4 or 5 days after that. And then the cycle keeps rolling. And I just got back from a 12-day deal actually that really spent a lot of time down in Carbon County, and then Natrona, and then Johnson, and then we ended up here on Saturday. Then jumped over the hill and had an event in Powell, and for the last couple of days.
You realize, of
home.
course, campaigning to be in Cheyenne full time in Johnson County is probably not the best campaign strategy. I mean, I'm just saying.
I'm with you, Dave. I'm with you.
All right.
We had a great turnout though in Buffalo, and even in Casey, it was good.
All right. So give me a list of the top 3 things that you're campaigning. What are your top 3 hills worth dying on?
Well, I tell you, taxes. Without a doubt. I mean, we have got to get these taxes under control, without a doubt.
What kind of taxes?
Oh, I'm talking particularly residential, which is just a portion of property tax. Ultimately, I want to completely get rid of residential property tax. I want to get rid of the fuel tax, and I want to cut state sales tax by.
But
by
how do we
1%.
pay for schools?
And we know that the schools, by constitutionally, are going to be paid anyway. And that has to happen. And what's gone on here, the governor sets a tone for the state. And we've gone down this green energy path. And oh boy, I tell you what, and that is something that, that I just will not do. And we changed that. And I mean, our mining, our oil, that really built this state. And if we look at our state seal, we got grain, we got livestock, we got mining, we got oil. That was just as much of it will just be just as much of our future as it was the past. I mean, that's it right there. And we got to get back to that. That's how we made all, the taxpayers now are the easy target. And, since we've had such a reduction in revenue from those sectors,
But have we really?
Well, yeah, we have. We have. I mean, historically, I think we have. I think one thing we've seen too is that, we've got government that's grown so big. And a report just came out yesterday that we have the largest state government per capita in the nation. Alaska's behind us, a little ways behind us, but we're still number one.
So let me ask you, the reason why I asked, has our revenue actually gone down? Because we just saw a budget pass that was arguably slightly below what the governor wanted, but it was still a huge increase over the past couple of years.
It was.
If you look at the past 5 years, the budget in Wyoming has doubled.
Yeah.
It was not that long ago. I want to say like 2021. Ken, maybe you got a better number on this, but 2021, our budget was roughly $5 billion.
Yeah.
Today, it was 4.5 is what it was. What was it, Ken? You're shaking your head. Turn your microphone
You
on.
got to go back farther than that. I'll find you numbers.
I want to say it was right around
Yeah.
COVID.
We need to sit down here. I'm trying to do 3 things at once. We need to sit down here with the number and just lay them out there the way they really are. And I do have all those numbers. I didn't bring them this morning. But everybody has a tendency, and I'm not pointing a finger at anybody. Everybody has a tendency to color the numbers to their own liking.
Well, sure.
And
they're statistics,
we have
right?
to be really careful that we don't do that. There has been a reduction in some revenues for coal, for example.
Right.
And
Minerals
others, but and
particularly.
I think
Maybe
get
that's
back
what you
to
were referring
that,
to.
yeah.
But, my point is that we are spending way more money than we have, probably ever. State government's grown a huge amount.
That's right.
And, the last number I heard, and this was a couple of years ago, but we had 800 state employees for every 10,000 Wyoming citizens. And there's communities like Buffalo where I would argue, you'd have to prove me wrong with numbers, but I think 3/4 of the town works for government in some way, shape, or form, whether it's schools or Forest Service or BLM. But so, we're spending a tremendous amount of money. So one of the questions I have on my list here, and maybe we need to talk about the People's Initiative first. Okay. You were one of the driving forces behind this 50% reduction in residential property taxes. So 2 questions. First, just give me the real high-level view of what that is, the People's Initiative. And then I've got another question for you.
Okay, so the People's Initiative, it'll be on the November ballot. general election ballot. It'll be on the last page. We're going to work with the Sec State and the AG to make sure that everybody understands exactly how that's going to be run. But it's 50% off the assessed value of the primary residence of Wyoming residents. So a Wyoming resident in this case, we equated that to somebody who's in-state tuition, in-state hunting. So it's a year, living here for a year.
And so it's just a straight 50% off the assessed value.
Right.
And that is that for 1 year, or is that
No, that's indefinite, and unless the legislature changes it after 2 years or something like that. Yeah.
All right. So next question. We're spending a tremendous amount of money, way more than I think that we probably ought to. If you're elected governor, how are you going to balance state and okay, admittedly this is kind of a loaded question, but how are you going to balance state revenues with that 50% reduction? How are you going to make the numbers work?
Okay, well, first off, we're going to audit. We're going to audit everything. I mean, because I fully recognize the municipalities have to do certain F-form audits. I got it. But statewide, we have not done a full-blown budgetary audit since 1989. So we really don't know what it truly takes to run the state. And you just mentioned, and I think I heard a number yesterday. It's 880 state employees, somewhere around there.
Yeah, it's
for
up
10,000.
from the number
It's
I
crazy.
mentioned.
Yeah, it's just unbelievable how large our state government is. But we audit. Well, I want to see the baseline. Every time I've taken over something or started something, been in charge of something, I've always wanted to audit everything to figure out where our zero is, where our baseline is. And that's what needs to happen. The people in this state deserve to know the final resting place of every tax dollar out there, because they are the ones that pay those taxes. But I think if you look at what we have in reserve, the rainy day account that everybody talks about, the $34 billion, and just last year, just in interest alone, we made about $1.86 billion on that, just in interest. Just in interest.
1/3 of the state's income.
There you go. So even if just say you were to get rid of all of residential property tax, which is about $625 million
Every year? Or is that biennially?
No, every year.
Okay.
So you could pay for that 3 times over just with the interest. I mean, it's crazy. All it is changing the funding models, and really the one thing I want to do is bring Wyoming accounting, those kind of things into the 21st century, because I think it is antiquated. I think some of these funding models need to be changed out, and it's just a matter of having the will to do it. It really is, and there's a lot of false narratives out there, and Ken kind of touched on it. These backfills, and fire, EMS, schools, all those kind of things. Those are critical. Those are essential services. I mean, those are not going to go away. Definitely not on my watch. And we even see. I mean, even if you look at what the governor did, granting $100 million to BWXT over in Gillette.
Yeah, that was.
It's for crying out loud.
That was offensive.
Oh yeah, I mean, for crying out loud. I mean, that'll pay for so much of this stuff. I mean, with all that discretionary money. The bottom line is there's plenty of money out there. It's just a matter of changing the funding models to make it happen.
Well, and it's the reason I asked you that question is quite a while ago, actually in 2024, I did an episode on the podcast called 50% Really Equals 10%. And the whole point in the show is that residential property taxes really don't account for that much of the revenue that comes into the state. In fact, it's a really small amount. And Ken, you can probably speak to this, that when we did, House Bill 45, the 4% cap, and everybody was screaming about, we're going to lose all of our county funding. Really, the end result is that most counties only saw like a 5% reduction.
Yeah, it's just a few percentage points when it comes right down to it. And I do that data, and it's not stuff that I made up. It's stuff that came to us from LSO. So
that's right.
You can trust it as much as you can trust anything.
Well, I've written a couple articles.
But, one of the things that comes into play there is you can make statistics say anything you want them to say. So it all depends on what you ask for, what you get back. But I wanted to ask you a question, Brent, that I think I don't hear enough when I hear you speak. You started out that saying, well, anytime I've taken over something, I've always wanted an audit. I would like you to go back and talk about a little bit of your history, some of the things that you've taken over. What kind of managerial experience do you actually have?
Well, and I think what's missing in Cheyenne, I think, is leadership. It's one thing to be a manager; it's another thing to be a leader. Typically, good leaders are good managers, but it's not necessarily vice versa on that. And again, the governor sets the tone for the state, and what's missing down there is, no kidding, principled conservative leadership, and we can talk about what I believe that means. But it's one of those things. Whenever, as a Marine officer, whenever I would take over something or be in command of something, it was a matter of doing audits on everything to figure out exactly where your zero is, where your starting point is, and make those kind of requisite
Well,
corrections. Yeah.
that's pretty, but it didn't answer my question. My question is, what some things did you take over? Because, it's I took over a motor pool that had 45 people and about a $6 million budget.
Sure.
Okay, that gives you an idea. What are we looking at? Something like that, or something larger? Or...
Well,
and I know you.
well,
I know
yeah,
you're the
as a-
last person to want to brag about about what you've done or whatever. But people need to know
Yeah,
when you say I have the capacity to manage Wyoming. They need to understand that comes
Sure.
from where.
Well, as a junior officer in the Marine Corps, the way they work is, they are always training you for the next level, and it's all about leadership. It starts off with small
Right.
unit leadership, and then gradually it grows. And as a junior officer, as a captain, I was a company commander for a while with Charlie Company, First Battalion 6 Marines. We went to Australia, Korea, and this is a whole rifle company with plussed up company with. With 50 cal and 81 millimeter mortars that are not typically down there, and you're in charge of quite a few Marines there. I mean, well over. I mean, these are 150 or so odd Marines, and then just the accountability with all that, the associated I guess property with that, and then later on down. Some of the projects, particularly when I was testing aircraft and weapon systems out at China Lake, California. I mean, these are hundreds of millions of dollars worth of stuff. And these are the ones. In fact, I will tell you, I couldn't believe it when I was testing the thermobaric hellfire out at China Lake, California. First one to shoot it, doing a lot of stuff down at White Sands Missile Range, and this was a very high visibility. It was defined by Donald Rumsfeld at the time, and it was the fastest multi-shot quick reaction assessment in China Lake history. As a multi-shot, it was 5 shots. And, I was leading this whole thing and saying, hey, this is what needs to happen. We had a huge budget for it. I can't recall exactly how many millions it was off the top of my head. And then, interestingly enough, is that both Rumsfeld and President Bush actually commented on how effective it was and how the test went on. And I was sitting on my couch one day, and when Bush was, I think it was the West Point or something like that, maybe the Naval Academy, when he came out and talked about thermobaric hellfire. And I had already moved back to North Carolina at the time. I was stationed back there, and then ultimately I became a squadron commander, which is 27 at least 27 aircraft, 500 some odd Marines, and then the associated budget with that, which naturally fluctuates. But and of course we had detachments going to Iraq, to Afghanistan, and then some on the ship, which we call a Marine Expeditionary Unit. So I'm in charge of all of these guys, making sure all muscle movements work. And of course, this comes down to, my leadership style, which is not trust but verify, but trust and empower. And we always hear the trust but verify, but man, I tell you what, if you got to verify everything, then you shouldn't put those people in there in the first place. When you empower folks, it's amazing what you can get out of them. And it's simply one of those things to where you define the objective, the fiscal and the time constraints, and as long as it's done morally and ethically, who cares how it gets done? Because I tell you, these guys have some phenomenal ideas
Right.
on how to make this work. And then later on in my career, I was out on Guam, the island of Guam, in the Marianas, and I was in charge of constructing this base on Guam, some on Tinian, a little bit on Saipan, and it was all part of this realignment in the Pacific, because our greatest adversary, without a doubt, is China. But this was close to a $9 billion project, and I knew at any given time where all that money was. And so, when I correlate that to here, and I see the lack of transparency, the lack of discipline when it comes down to our budgeting, to our spending, to me, it's completely unsatisfactory. And I'm like, okay, this again comes down to the leadership from the top saying, no, this is what we're doing. The people, are owed this. And it really does come down to a supporting, which those are the military terms, but the government supports the people. That's just the way it is. The people are the supported. The government's the supporting, and that paradigm's completely shifted right
Absolutely, it
now.
is.
And it needs to revert back to what it was.
Thank you for doing that. I really appreciate it. I just wanted to point out, you said a $9 billion, and how many years ago was that?
That was 2016 to 2019.
Okay, and so right now, Wyoming's budget is about 10 million, 10, 11 million.
Billion.
So it's
Yeah.
billion. Yeah,
That's right. That's right.
billion. Leave
I-
it to
they all
somebody.
get-
Leave
they
it
all
to
get
somebody from
confused.
appropriations to drop a few zeros. But I wanted people to understand that this isn't somebody that's talking about having done some minor things and this is going to be exponentially larger. You've already been here.
Yeah. Yeah.
So thank you for that.
All right, well, let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll get into more of the politics surrounding the governor's race. Brent Bean on the program this morning. We'll be back in a minute. Make sure that you subscribe and follow the Cowboy State Politics podcast. You can do that from the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, or anywhere that you get your podcasts. That way, you'll make sure that you won't miss a single episode of Cowboy State Politics. Hunting season. Right about now, you're off with all of your pals, stalking the big gigantic elk or buck mule deer that you've been thinking about all summer long. And your lovely wife is at home, probably enjoying her time without you. But soon, my friend, all of that is going to come to a screeching halt. And I want you to think about just one little thing. She's able to park her car inside the garage because all of your hunting crap is with you right now. Now, if you'd like the marital bliss to continue, I suggest you make a call to Marcos and Jesse at Morton Buildings. Their phone number is 307-674-2532. They can build you a garage or a barn or any other type of metal structure for you to store all of your toys in so that your wife can continue parking inside the garage. And you can avoid sleeping on the couch for the next month or two. Call Morton Buildings. Their phone number is 307-674-2532. Get them to build you a metal building before it's too late. Welcome back to the program, Cowboy State Politics Live. I'm David Iverson, doing what I was born to do with talent given to me by the man upstairs, God himself. Welcome back to the program. I'm joined today by candidate for Wyoming's governor, Brent Bean. Finally, we were able to get this arranged. Now, I have to give you a little crap here, Colonel. The Master Chief, my father-in-law, he always says when the experts screw everything up, then they call in the professionals. And so you are a full bird colonel,
sergeant.
right?
That's
Or
the
what?
I was. Yeah, I retired as a full bird colonel. I did.
All right. So what does that mean? I mean, everybody watches these military movies, and you see the colonel walk out, and it's he's the big guy. But what does that actually mean?
Well, I tell you, I was very privileged, just to serve this nation. And what I will say, just a caveat first, is the greatest way to serve this country is simply to love it. I mean, it really is. That's the greatest way to do it. I chose coming out of UW, out of the engineering college there, to go into the Marine Corps to fly. I had no intention of staying in as long as I did, but it's one of those things. You go through the ranks. You start as a second lieutenant, then first lieutenant, captain, major, lieutenant colonel, and then colonel. And then, depending upon who knows you or whatever it is, you potentially may become a flag officer, which is a general. And A lot of it just comes down, you're every day you're under scrutiny. It's all about leadership. It's about decision making. It's about do your Marines and I had some joint forces under me. Do those folks trust you? And can you accomplish what's required to get done? And but and it's from a company, that's a smaller group of guys. I mean, that's one of the first things. Really, platoon leader if you're a ground guy, and then you get to potentially go to a company commander, and then from that, if you're on the ground side, it would go to a battalion, and then a regiment, and then a division as you go up the chain. On the air side, typically there's not a whole. A lot of it comes down to the flight designation. So. I was an instructor just about all my career in that. And, as younger pilots are coming up, you're grading them every flight on everything. And so you end up, the first thing really is just to become an attack helicopter commander, which is a single aircraft. And then you get a section, which is at least 2 aircraft, a division, which is at least 4 aircraft. And then you go up to a flight, which is multiple divisions. And so that's kind of the way it works on the air side, and then you become a squadron commander, potentially a group commander, then a wing commander. So that responsibility and just keeps growing.
So why'd you retire? Why'd you get out? I mean, you spent.
Yeah.
The reason I'm asking that is you obviously spent a lot of time in the military, and
I did.
One step below a flag officer.
Mm.
Did you just decide you've had enough, or?
I think that had a lot to do with it. I think it was one of those things. I was still relatively young, and I enjoyed it all the way through, and I think it was just it's just one of those things. When the time comes, it's time to do something different, and that's what I ended up.
Okay,
doing, yeah.
So next question then. Okay. So you've had a lot of military experience. You ran the base on Guam. Full bird colonel. Is there a difference between leading a military base and being in the civilian world leading the state? I mean, what would be the main differences there?
Oh, I think there's quite a few differences, but I think the principles are the same. I think the difference is when it comes down to direct accountability, and what the whole discipline process, in the military, and I mean, folks are held to very high standards.
You can't throw the house in the brig.
That's right.
Though some of them we should.
That's right.
No offense, Ken.
And of course here there's different legal proceedings to do that, and that's but when it comes down again to leadership, I think and I keep hearing that term, and I'm not Chesty Puller, I'm not George Patton, I'm not one of those guys, but I do know how to lead, and it's kind of like that term gets thrown around so much, and I think the way it's kind of being used is more in a managerial sense. And it is one thing to be able to manage folks and manage certain things. It's a whole other thing to lead them down the path that you're trying to get there to a common objective. And so much of it is based on trust. And I will tell you this is that there is a requirement on my as a Marine to where you do a command climate survey once every 18 months, and I wanted it done once a quarter because these are all anonymous. You never know what the young guys are saying, but the reason is because other than somebody dying, the thing that mattered to me the most was, do my Marines trust me? Do the guys underneath me, do they trust me? And so the Naval Safety Center, and at the time I was the only one doing this, doing it so frequently and put these trust questions in there. And it came down to, do you trust your commander? Do you trust your command staff? And then I modified a few other questions. The reason is because if they trusted me, it didn't matter how nasty the mission was or whatever it was, that they would do it, and I'd be right there with them the whole time. And so to me, and that's I think one thing, and that's why I harp so much on trust, is if there's a way to garner just a little bit, to earn just a little bit of trust from the citizenry, man, our rightful spot is on top.
All right, so let me be a little bit more specific. I was kind of vague with my question. But here's the real question.
Yep.
So being in the military, you're the boss, right?
Right.
You're running the base. What the colonel says goes.
Right.
That's very different than being in the governor's office because you've got a House, which right now, you got a majority there. You got a Senate. Well, frankly, they're not going to be on your side right now. How are you going to work with people who have differing ideas about how things should be done. I mean, the governor can say one thing, but the legislature might say something different. How are you going to handle that dynamic?
Well, I think first, the governor is the chief law enforcement officer in the state, and my whole thing is equal application of law across the board, regardless of who's doing that, whether they're a clerk or whatever they are, right? And exercising that accordingly, because the people deserve accountability. Right. Now, with our state government right now, we do have an overpowering executive. I think we have I think we have a judiciary that's in somewhat of the same boat. I see the legislature is probably the weakest of the three branches, and whether that's because they're part time, I don't know. But it's one of those things to kind of look at. But my end state, when I'm done, I want everything rebalanced, and I'm going to use that authority to rebalance it all, and then make sure through the legislature that it never happens again. So what I'm talking about specifically is I want confirmation on our judgeships, and legislative confirmation on our judgeships, because we see, all of us should be appalled at some of these decisions coming out of the Supreme Court, but none of us should be surprised. But I do want legislative confirmation on those. I don't think we're to a point of putting them on the ballot, because people don't even research the gubernatorial candidates. So why, this whole thing with the judgeships? I think a lot of these commissions, whether it's Oil and Gas Commission, a lot of these State Board of Education, whatever it is, I do think that there should be some sort of adjudication process through the legislature on that. But one of the things that needs to happen is the long-term plan for the state. Where are we going? And I've been a planner my whole time. That's strategic planning, operational planning, tactical planning, and tactical planning is that time of execution. Strategic is a long-term outlook, and it's like, okay, this is what we're looking at here in the next 25 years or whatever. And as we get closer to that execution year, naturally there's more fidelity to the plan. And I think, just like the people, because ultimately it's consent of the governed, and it comes down to bringing the people in from the get-go. So, and that's one thing I fully intend on doing, is being out there saying, hey, here's the deal. Get those legislators that understand and where we're going, where I want to take the state. Naturally, it's not a unitary thing. I totally get that, and that's why I say that to make these changes permanent, we need the legislature in there, because I don't want to do all this stuff via executive fiat. Not some of it I can't, yeah, a lot of it I can't. So that's why we need the legislators in there who truly understand where we want to take the state, what the end state's going to look like, and guys, this is how we need to do it. This and those first few days, next January, it's like, okay, we're going to identify. We're doing it right now. Those major muscle movements that need to happen legislatively, and then getting the folks on board who understand where we're trying to go here, and make that happen.
All right. Well, let's get a legislator in here.
Yeah, I appreciate those comments, but I don't think the legislature is going to be your issue. The issue is going to be the executive branch. Yep. And because you've come in as the new commander, there is the establishment. There are the old NCOs that have been running this motor pool since before you had.
That's right.
Anyway, I almost said something I shouldn't say. The old soldier creeps back up in me.
I know.
Yeah, I know that you know what that is like, especially when you get a little bit emotional. But you don't get emotional. But I think the challenge is you've got like 70 different agencies. They've got people that have been there for 15 or 20 or 30 years that are going to be there long after you're gone. And they see somebody come in and just say, it'll blow over, and we pretty much just yes sir, no sir. But you talked about maybe replacing people. Man, you start looking at how many people it would take just for the key agencies, YDOT and others, and what it would take. What does that mean to you? How do you win their trust, and how do you trust them?
Well, and a lot of this does come down to audit. It comes down to, I'd like to put a moratorium on any functions initially, and say, okay, what's really going on here, and figure out where all this money's going, what's actually happening. I've sat there and I've looked at these key jobs that are actually out there, and what can be streamlined, what can actually be consolidated under, a position. And again, this is about streamlining and making the government far more efficient for the people and better representing the people. And I know it's the bureaucracy, right? It's whether it's the agencies, whether it's the associations, and of course the associations are a little bit different, but those things, the bureaucracy is really what's pressuring so much of our electeds. And it's a tough thing to do, and that's why when I look at these things it really ties into some of these. It's almost the concept of endorsement. I don't want any strings when I go in there, because it's one of the only endorsement that truly matters to me is from the folks, and that's why I don't actively solicit endorsements, because I know, just doing, looking into this for so long here, and of course you know it better than I do, Ken, but it's like there are some major muscle movements that are going to happen. And it's one of those things, we need two things to fix this state. We need the right people, and we need the will to do it. And I've got the will to do it. It just comes down to finding those others that do.
So let's talk about one of those things that you brought up. You brought up the judiciary.
Okay.
And right now, we have the Judicial Nominating Committee, and you've got three, and Ken, help me out with the numbers here, but I think the way it works is you've got three people that are from the Bar Association.
Right.
You've got the governor appoints a couple of them, I think 2 or 3.
Right.
And then you have the Chief Justice, who kind of, moderates the whole thing and votes in the event of a tie. And so should you become governor, you get to appoint some of those people.
That's right.
And there's a ton of boards that the governor appoints.
That's right.
But so would you first, this is a tough one, I think. So would you work with the legislature before you switch that up, or would you try to nominate people who are largely conservative? Because there's a ton of power there. You could reshape the judiciary pretty easily.
There's no question. We've seen how slow the legislative process is. I think it's one of those things that when I talk about rebalancing, it's like I'm going to use that authority to rebalance. However that looks, naturally I want the legislature. And the reason I want the legislature is because it's the people's voice by proxy. And I want that ultimately to happen. And if I have the opportunity to appoint conservative judges before all that, all those changes take place, then I'll do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I know I told you I'd give you a couple of minutes to talk about endorsements, and I think that that's entirely warranted. So we had Harriet endorse your opponent, Megan Degenfelder, yesterday.
That's right.
What do you think about that?
I'm not concerned about it. I like I say, we've got just an incredible network. And, I think the people are making their case known right now on all over social media.
Pretty crazy, actually.
It is. And again, I think it's one of those things that it actually eases me because I don't have any strings, but again, the only poll that matters is August 18th. The only endorsement that truly matters is from the folks. And that's why like I say, I don't actively solicit those endorsements, but I don't think it's going to hurt us at all. I think we have just an unbelievably group of loyal individuals, and it just keeps growing, and they're fantastic people.
I wanted to say this about social media. That in itself is an echo chamber.
For sure.
It is.
And
It
I know
is. There's
a
no
lot of
question.
times you get in a trap and thinking this is how the people feel. But when I go out, and this is what I commend you for doing, and you're talking to the people.
Yeah.
I go door to door and I start talking to the people, and it's a whole different world.
It is.
And all the things that I've been hearing and all the things that I fear tend to go away. Well, what about all of the animosity toward the Freedom Caucus?
Mm-hmm.
Well, what about it? I'm not seeing it when I go out and talk to the people individually.
That's right.
That's where it's at.
It is. And, all these small towns, we're talking Bags, we're Bear Oil, Jeffrey City. I think, Jeffrey City turned out to be a 3.5-hour deal there, which is great. I typically, at an hour and 29 minutes, what you're not going to see me do is punch. I just don't. I'll stay there, and assuming I can, as long as the folks want to talk. And they've got some incredible ideas, and they just want to be heard in a lot of cases. And it's just amazing getting out there and talking with them. It's right, not talking to them, but really talking with them. And man, I tell you what, I want to get the folks in the conversation as soon as I can.
Have you done any polling?
No, we really haven't. You can poll AI, but of course AI is, kind of all over the place depending upon what kind of variables you have. There's been some polling done. Here's one thing I'll tell you is over the last year, there's been some polling done, as you know. And interestingly, on a lot of these polls, my name's not even on there.
I know.
And so it's like, okay, are these really accurate or not? And same thing with the media, with some of the papers around the state is, okay, why is my name not in there? And so it's one of those things to where it really looks like a concerted effort to keep true conservatives out of the race. Whether that's the case or not, I don't know. But anyway, we're pushing through. I mean, we just keep going, and it's like, you know what? Whatever they say is whatever they say. We'll take our case to the folks.
All right, well, let's run you through some of the paces here.
Okay.
Earlier on in the broadcast, you said the word conservative. What does that mean?
Well, here's what a principled conservative is. It's someone who has an unwavering, and that's the key. There's an unwavering belief in individual sovereignty and self-governance, the two principles around which our entire Constitution was written. American exceptionalism, because we are hands down the greatest civilization in the history of the world, and absolute truth, because regardless of what anybody says, God defines the rules, and that's just the way it is. But the key there is unwavering, and that's what I see as a no-kidding principled conservative. It's about conserving our liberty, but it is one of those things to where we understand where it all came from, why it's so important, and why we go to bat for it.
Okay, all right. So, big topic in the state. The legislature passed the heartbeat bill, which I was very thankful for, though
Yeah.
I'm very disappointed in our Supreme Court. Where are you on abortion? Should we have exceptions? That seems to be a big topic. Talk to me.
No, I have yet to. Now, I personally believe that life starts at conception. So I made a comment after that Supreme Court decision last fall. I can't remember exactly when it was, but I said, it's contradictory to the documents that they're sworn to uphold. Life, liberty, life, that's what it's all about. And I keep hearing these exceptions, the three typical exceptions,
Life of the mother.
life of the mother, incest, those kind of
Right.
things. And I'm like, who are the people to judge? I mean, God's the final arbitrator on all of this. And, I have yet to hear one good reason for an abortion. So that's the way I stay. I believe that
Well, there
life
is no
starts at
good
conception.
reason.
Yeah, right, exactly. And nobody can divine one. And that's where I stand on it. I do believe that life begins at conception, and that's how I'll govern.
All right. Now, as far as the Second Amendment goes, Wyoming's sitting, in my opinion, we're sitting pretty good as far as firearms go.
Yeah.
We got the SAPA law. We weren't able to quite get it tuned up the way that we wanted it. Constitutional carry, got all those things. If you're governor, what would you do to further strengthen the Second Amendment rights in the state, or do you think that we're in a good spot? What would you do?
My first question to folks is, what part of shall not be infringed do they not understand? And I look at and I understand the reason for the SAPA bills, and I would have signed this last one without a doubt. But it's like, we've gotten to this point to where, why do we need this additional legislation? What part of that shall not be infringed do people not understand? So as the chief law enforcement officer of the land, and understanding that my oath that I took back in, May 11th of 1991 when I was sworn into the Marine Corps never expires. And that's to support and defend the Constitution of the United States, against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And so I will govern that way. It's, there is nobody in this state who's more pro-Second Amendment than me. Nobody's more.
Well, maybe except for the other two guys sitting at this.
No,
table.
maybe as much, but not more. But so that's the way I look at it. I mean, it is one of those things. There's, as we know, the primary reason, really the governing reason for the Second Amendment is to prevent tyranny, and to make sure that the folks are the final voice. And our state constitution, Article 1, Section 1, says that the people are, hold the final authority. I mean, they are the governing body, truly.
So the governor has broad discretion over some aspects of state spending. There's got a big giant slush fund.
Yeah.
At one point, I don't know what it is now, but at one point, the governor had $300 million at his disposal. If you're the governor, what would you do with the energy matching funds, the slush fund? What would you do with it?
Well, what I'm not going to do is give multi-billion-dollar corporations any incentive, a bunch of money. Okay, I'm not going to do that. And, I was over at Jeffrey City, and I'm just saying this because I've been to all these fire halls, so many fire halls around the state. And, I got a tour of the fire hall there, and I'm like, holy mackerel, when's the last time you guys got any money to fix this thing? I mean, the thing looks like it's about ready to fall down.
Probably
They got
is.
one of the biggest fire jurisdictions, it's 2,000 square miles. And I'm thinking, holy mackerel. And, those are the kind of things when I look, and it's like, okay, first off, why aren't they getting any money to fix this? And when I look at those kind of things, it's okay, there's certain things out there that can be fixed right away. naturally we go through the typical contractual process, the bidding process, whatever it is. And then we figure out exactly how we're going to spend this taxpayer money because, I got to remind folks that, the government doesn't have a penny to its name nor an acre to its name. It's all the people's. It's just that the people have delegated authority, whatever it is, oversight, whatever it is, on that through the government. The people own it all. And that's why with the government, it's the people who have responsibility, right? And so when I look at that money, I always said as a Marine, I'm like, I'm a taxpayer, therefore I'm somewhat self-employed. So, I'm going to be as judicious with this money as I can, and that's the way I look at it, with all this taxpayer money, out there.
Okay, so you just said that the people have responsibility over their own money because it's all our money. The government doesn't. The state can't print money, and even if it could,
Boy,
it would.
try and tell the current legislature that.
Well, I know.
It's not their money. They flat out have said that.
Yeah.
It is not their money.
That's right.
Yeah, it's our money. Yeah, bull crap. But the people have responsibility. Now, you just mentioned the fire halls, right? So, and I believe your question is why aren't they getting money to fix their fire hall? Okay, well, is that not a form of picking winners and losers? Saying this community over here gets cash, this community over here gets
well,
cash?
it depends. And this is why I want to audit everything. It's like, okay, what's really going on here? We have over 650 special districts in this state. They all have taxing authority. And it's like, okay, so why are certain things getting funded? Why are certain things not? I don't know the answer to all that. I don't. But it does come down to the local governments on what's really being requested, and then how is that money actually being appropriated? And based on a set of requirements, because I am a purpose and requirements guy. What's the requirement and what's the purpose? It's as black and white as I could put it. Just being an engineer and being an aviator is, I look at things as black and white as I can. And I know there's some minutia in there, but when it, and that's the principle of the issue. So it's what, why is this not happening? And then so we got to take a look at that and figure out. But you're right. I mean, they're picking winners and losers is not the government's job, and that's my stance on business too.
Okay, so let's talk about that.
Okay.
Wyoming Business Council. You lived in Sheridan for a long time,
right?
In fact, the house you used to own has one of your signs in the front yard.
I still own it. Yeah.
Okay, so it's still your house.
Oh, yeah.
No wonder why it has a sign. But there's a pretty good example of
There's another sign up there now too.
There is. I saw it this morning.
There's a pretty good example of where the Wyoming Business Council had a success here in Sheridan.
Weatherby.
So, I mean, there may be a place for that. Big business park north of town.
Mm-hmm.
So where are you on the business council?
Well, excuse me, in general, the only business government has in business is to get out of the way. It really does. It's a matter of deregulation, cutting taxes. It's a matter of making sure that we don't enforce ESG or allow ESG into the environmental social governance scoring into this system, because that's really the teeter-totter right there, right? On favoring that teeter-totter. And I always say this one, but guaranteeing you'll never, ever shut this state down again. Okay, like what happened back in 2020.
Right.
And that's why I'm
disgrace.
Right. That's exactly right. So, it's again, I don't see a necessity for it. I think the money that the people have spent on the Wyoming Business Council and the return, I don't think has been worth it. I think it's, again, that's my baseline. It's like, okay, let's incentivize through tax cuts, through deregulation. I don't want just small businesses just to exist. I want them to grow if they can. And that's a lot of that is simply getting government out of the way, letting these guys do it, because these guys, and letting the free market work, letting, capitalism in its true form work. And again, I'm not looking at this Pollyanna or rose-colored glasses. I know there's going to be a lot of challenges with that. Most of them are going to be internal, just like we were talking before. And, but again, I know what needs to happen. It's a matter of getting there and getting people on board to make it happen. And I think, and that's one reason why I want to cut taxes so much, because I want that money to stay here in Wyoming instead of going to BlackRock or Vanguard or State Street or whatever, because that's where so much of it's going. It's all being invested. That $34 billion is all in pixels. And it's like, let's keep that here to grow our local economies. And one of the biggest concerns I've seen in all these small cities or small towns, particularly in the Southwest, that were so much built on minerals, and even up here, but it's their biggest concern is that their town's dying. Well, their town's dying because our energy policies have shifted toward these green energy projects, and not back to what truly built this state, which is the oil and which is the mining, and that's what we got to get going again. And of course, our agriculture is huge. A huge part of that.
All right. So you mentioned all the windmills.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that's what you're referring
Right.
to. So if somebody wants to put up a windmill on their property and contract with one of these energy companies, I mean, are you okay with that? Or are you only referring to subsidies or whatnot? Talk to me about that, because I think there's kind of a natural push and pull between there, because you have a lot of private companies that are doing this, and there's a lot that rely on subsidies. So where's the line there?
Well, and we see that windmills, solar panels, or wind turbines is so highly subsidized. Okay, and all the Biden Inflation Act reduction money is going to end in October. So right now we're seeing all these developers, these green energy developers, throwing everything at the wall right now to try to get something to stick. And what so the way I see these things is, first off, boy. I am very much opposed to them. Now, first off, when it comes down to private property, okay, there's nobody in this state that truly owns their land. Nobody does. Okay, and that's one of the things I want to make happen. Okay, I want people to be able to truly own their land, especially if they don't have a mortgage on it or it's inherited or whatever. Okay, that being said, one of the issues I hear is, okay, well, I can do it on my land. Well, hold on a second. If there's a direct adverse effect to the value or use of adjacent lands, then that's where I draw the line on this. And of course, that's a local legal issue. But I think one of the things we got to look at is, why in the world aren't we doing environmental impact studies on these things? Each one of those doggone turbines sheds, close to 140 pounds of epoxies and everything on the leading edge of
They're
these
pretty
blades.
nasty, actually.
They really are. And these are all in, I mean, every part of the state has some sort of drainage to it. So this is leaching in, and whatever's going on, and but I will tell you that on the slib's going to be completely different, because there is no way I'm going to allow this, or I will ever vote for this on any of these projects on state land. I just won't do it, and because I know that they're not worth it. They're so heavily subsidized, and the thing is the bonding. Half of these things, I don't even know if they're bonded. We've been trying to find that. We've been trying to find the environmental impact studies of these. But, of course, this comes down also to the Industrial Siting Council. That panel of 6. Those guys need to be replaced by people who are, no kidding, pro. And I call them organic fuels, because gas, oil, and coal are organic. And Tron and everything else, I mean, they are. They're not fossil fuels. You can't put a bone in your gas tank and expect to go. So and the other thing too is they need to be recited as industrial and taxed accordingly. And I think if that truly happens, there's going to be less of a tendency for these growers to do, or for these landowners to do that, private landowners.
All right, so we've got about 3 minutes left. Before we go to a break, Brent, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Dave.
I really appreciate it. If my viewers want to get a hold of you, how do they do that?
Yeah, just come up brentbn.com. And my schedule is always posted. In fact, tonight I'm going to be at Upton at the community center at 6 o'clock, and then I'll be over in Newcastle, Sundance over the next couple of days.
All right. Well, I appreciate it, Brent. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dave.
We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll finish up the show. Are you tired of all the meaningless political drivel floating around right now? Endless commentary that really doesn't have anything backing it up? Do you long for the days of true investigative journalism coming from an authoritative source who really doesn't care how popular and apparently good-looking a politician is? Fortunately for you, that's what I do on Cowboy State Politics. New episodes are published every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday, and you can get them anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest way is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There, you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles I might bring up during the course of the program. Cowboy State Politics Live, the program you're listening to right now, is broadcast every Tuesday through Friday, beginning at 8 a.m. Pay attention to all of that other block-headed nonsense if you want. Just make sure that you don't miss an episode of Cowboy State Politics. And now, back to our program. Welcome back to the program, Cowboy State Politics Live on a Thursday. I'm David Iverson, documented to be almost always right 99% of the time. And I'll have you know, Agent 29, I definitely hit the nail on the head with this Megan Degenfelder endorsement. One more in the Dave is Right column, though I think that one was a pretty easy one to be right about. But there's another guy that has jumped into the U.S. House race. I don't know what we're up to now, 24, 28. I mean, it goes up every single day. From the Pravda on the Platte.
But are any of those people on the bingo card?
No, well, I don't. You know what? You know that you have made it when you are on the Rhino Rocket bingo card for the next person that Reed Reisner is going to sue.
Can't wait.
Can't wait. From the Pravda on the Platte. In an article entitled Another Contender, this Wyoming rancher has entered the crowded race for the state's lone U.S. House seat. And like I said, there's probably like 85 people running for that right now. Moran rancher and outfitter Frank Chapman announced his campaign for Wyoming's sole U.S. House seat Wednesday. The seventh to declare for the U.S. House. Chapman will face a crowded Republican primary. And hold on here. So just so we know who we're talking about, this is Frank Chapman. I don't know him, never met him, don't know much about him. But already declared for the race are former Superintendent of Public Instruction Jillian Balow, Senate President Dennis Beitman, Bo Beitman, veteran Kevin Christensen, and here's another thing, right? So if all of these people are running for the House, shouldn't we know a little bit more about them? Or has the Wyoming media already picked their favorite? I think it's probably the latter. So we have Kevin Christensen, David Geralt, both of whom are veterans. Wyoming Secretary of State Chuck Gray, whom we heard from yesterday, and Casper businessman Reed Reisner. Now, he'll probably end up suing all of his competitors in the race. I guess that's his strategy to win. Chapman, who
wonder how many attorneys he has on staff.
Man, wouldn't you like to know that? I mean, it's he's got to have a ton of them. I mean, I guess there is a legal industry in Wyoming, and I suppose he's supporting a lot of it. Chapman, who owns the Heart 6 Ranch near Moran, said in a news release that he's a conservative aligned with President Donald Trump and Make America Great Again. Quote, I didn't set out to run for office, he said, but when you see Washington policies threatening Wyoming livelihoods, you step up and fight. Chapman's priorities include supporting Wyoming's energy industry, protecting grazing and land use rights, and limiting federal regulatory authority. Quote, too many decisions affecting Wyoming are being made by bureaucrats and liberal judges in Washington, D.C. All right, one more quick little paragraph. Chapman has dealt with federal agencies in a business capacity and has firsthand experience with regulations affecting ranchers, outfitters, and small business from operating under the U.S. Forest Service and National Park Service. All right, so I don't know anything about this guy. I'll try to get him on the program so we can talk about him. But my question is, if you already have a couple of candidates that, you know, and we don't know much about a lot of candidates except for Chuck Gray, Reed Reisner, and Dennis. But if there is already a candidate in the race that pretty much has all your same positions, why would you run for election? Because you can do it better, I suppose. Maybe you have more experience, but you've got to be able to set yourself apart from your competitors. Because if you don't, I mean, it's going to end up being just kind of a flip of the coin, whoever gets the short straw, or however you want to put it. But it seems like doesn't seem like we are getting so many candidates in the race that it's just going to be a free for all, anybody's game type of thing.
We're going to have the poster child for the need for a runoff election.
This is,
because you can see somebody like Barlow winning with 22% of the vote.
Well, yeah. So look at Matt Mead. And of course, this Chapman guy, he's running for the U.S. House. But so Matt Mead, he won with, I think, 29%, 29%. Mark Gordon won with 33%. So our history in electing governors is that they have nowhere close to the majority of the electorate. And even so, and perhaps this is the biggest problem, that the amount of people that vote in any given election is really, really small. Half of the people that are registered to vote, or that are eligible to vote in Wyoming, are registered, and only about half of those actually vote. So really, in any given election, maybe you've got a quarter of the people that are actually voting. I mean, Ken, in your last election, how many total votes were there?
I don't remember, but I want to say I was in the neighborhood of 2,500.
Okay.
But and I won fairly handily.
Yeah,
I'm talking the general. But that's out of a 10,000.
Right.
So it's pretty close to what you're saying.
Yeah, so a really, really small number. And I mean, I think you would agree with me on this one, Ken, that the biggest problem we have is apathy. And that apathy, I think, stems from the politics as usual.
Yeah, part of what it stems from is what difference does it make?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter who I elect. Everything tends to the same. And that is because for years and years, the people that could make a difference weren't running, frankly.
Yeah. They're all out riding motorcycles and fishing.
When I was on Jake's show, and I hate to even mention him here. Yeah. Don't have a two-thirds majority, so every other year we do pretty well, and then when the budget session comes, anyway. I'm not whining. I'm just saying nothing changes overnight, and I'm listening to Brent BM, and I love his ideas.
Yeah, we need to talk about that.
A governor at best has only got 8 years, and man, as the first 2 years or 4 years that I've been in, I feel like it takes that long just to get your feet on the ground and understand how it works. That's one of many reasons why term limits is not particularly a great idea.
One of the many reasons.
Yeah, but anyway, let's kind of talk to myself into a hole there.
so let's talk about the interview. I mean, we had Brent for the better part of an hour.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, the same Brent that eyes have come to know through these many years, I think that some of the challenges that he faces, you can't know. I guess I compare it a little bit to Trump's first term. And you come in and you've got a lot of positions that you have to staff. And
that's just what I was thinking.
That's going to be a struggle. How that gets worked out is in large part dependent on how adept and how flexible the person is. And I don't know how many people Brent is working with that are out there. He did indicate as he was leaving off the air that he had some people lined out for some things. But This is a big problem, and I don't believe any one governor is going to be the answer. This is going to be a long haul, and it's going to take a reversal of the apathy that you just mentioned.
Well, and I think you bring up a very solid point that a lot of the problem with government is, yes, it's the people that are running it. It absolutely is some politicians that sell us out to the redcoats. I mean, those are big problems. But I think the bigger one is the bureaucracy, and I think you made a salient point during our discussion with Brent that man, these people have been there. They've probably seen 4 or 5 governors, and they'll probably be there long after our next governor is gone. And so, how is it that you and it's the same problem that Trump is facing, as you pointed out. That how do you break up that bureaucracy? That there are so many people that are in the executive branch that I mean, it would you'd empty out a whole town.
The first step to breaking it up is to make it smaller.
Yeah.
And we proved this last session just how ridiculously difficult that is. Every time we would talk about not even a cut, just slowing down the rate of growth by 1% or 2.
No, that's a cut.
And it was drastic. It was draconian. We've lost any sense of reality about where we're really at. When we were talking property taxes, go back 6 years, property tax was a whole different thing. And so we've peaked. We've gotten all kinds of revenue that we never expected off of that. But if you want to touch any of that, by golly, people will be out on the streets. We won't have any fire engines. We won't have any,
everything.
Everything is so distorted.
Well, and it's partly due to the media, because and if you look at any of the media sources, excluding the Open Range Record, because it's mine, and because it's also true, or at least I'm part owner in it, a lot of these media companies make an extraordinary amount of money off of government. And the easiest place to see that is newspapers. Newspapers make a truckload of cash off of just public advertisements, the legals.
Look at the trouble we had trying to get rid of public radio and public television.
That was amazing.
Yeah, I mean,
and the arguments for it were good.
Yeah, well, how many people are going to die because they won't hear a tornado warning because you took down public TV? How many people even watch public TV?
Well, and the argument that really surprised me that didn't land, that I really thought it would be, that it would, is, look, we're told that everything you do is so valuable, right? That all of these programs, it's such amazing journalism that we can't get rid of it. Yeah. Okay, well, if that is true, then you should be able to compete in the market.
Yeah, if you have this great programming that everybody loves, and some of their programming is really good.
Some.
Then it should, I did say some, then it should be able to survive on its own. And if it's not worth propping up. It's a little bit like windmills and solar panels. They're subsidized so heavily that you don't have to be good.
Well, and that's, again, I was really surprised that argument, that people weren't, maybe they were persuaded with it, and it's just a function of
I think a lot of people were, but the echo chamber, the press, the insiders, I love that term, insiders, because that's really what it is.
Absolutely.
That's what we were talking to Brent about, is the insiders there, the cabal. That's where we need the term limits. When a new governor comes in, he needs to have an entourage of leadership. Now, Trump did that his second time in. He brought in a whole bunch of his own people. Yeah, and that's something that I hope Brent would be doing, that to learn from the mistakes of others and not to fall prey. But even then, this government that we have right now in Wyoming is so vast. You would take so many good minds, and I have to credit John Bear for this point. This is one very good point that he makes. You would take so many good minds out of the free market so fast that it's going to be an issue.
And that's an argument for government being too big. I mean,
exactly.
That is absolutely not an argument to continue the status quo.
Yep.
Because I mean, it used to be that if you went into public service when working for the government was service, if it ever was, you didn't go in there to get rich because you couldn't. You would get an average wage. Now the benefits were much better, but that's the trade-off, right? You have good benefits, a mediocre salary. By mediocre, I don't mean bad. I mean middle of the road.
Yeah, you can get by. You're not going to do as well as others, but the retirement's good.
Sure.
The other benefits, and something very significant that I think gets overlooked in a lot of these discussions, it's almost impossible to get fired.
Almost, yeah.
You're basically, you get in there, you're going to be there for as long as you want to be there. And some would turn around and say, well, that's the problem with the legislature, especially at the national level. And there is a problem. We don't need 40-year career politicians. But when let me draw this little picture. We're part-time legislators, and they say part-time is
Well,
tongue-in-cheek because it's a full-time job. But everybody around you, whether they be the agencies, whether they be the lobbyists, whatever, they're all full-time. The executive branch,
All of them.
they're all full-time. Judicial branch, they're all full-time. And you come in there part-time. That's why, and Brent was exactly right, the legislature is the weakest leg, because one thing, we are only part-time, and I'm not advocating that we become full-time. The rest of them need to become more like the part-time. But it is such a monumental task just to catch up and attempt to do anything, and then it's over. And
So what did you say? You said there was, 880 state employees for every...
I didn't say. I do have a long list which we should share, and it's a printout of unfilled positions. And most of those unfilled positions are still funded in case they need to bring somebody in. That is an issue that we have not talked about much, that needs to be considered. And that's one way to downsize. And I will tell you that our Appropriations Committee has been looking closely at that and trying to eliminate as many of those positions as we can. And even that, you can't fire that person that isn't there.
So
You know?
just using some round numbers. So if there's 800 state employees for every 10,000 citizens, and that number's bigger now. That was the 800 was from a couple of years ago. So if you do the math, that equals 46,400 state employees. Now, obviously, you're not going to replace all of those, nor could you, because a lot of those are, teachers and, snowplow drivers.
Yeah,
and,
highway patrolmen. Troopers.
Sure. So many of those are. But just look at the size of that number. 46,000 people work for, and it's actually more than that, work for state government. I mean, the size of the monstrosity of Wyoming's government, and we're a small state, but it's gigantic.
Yeah.
46,000 people, and when a new governor comes in, I would hope that you come in with a team and you've got a plan to go forward. But man, you talk about a big task, and we talked about a couple of the boards and commissions, but those are only the big ones, and more often than not, those are not the boards and commissions that make the whole thing work.
Yeah, any one person only has so big a circle of influence, and so you have to trust a lot. And he was talking about getting people to trust him, to have trust in him, and that aspect is there. But as a leader, especially if you're one who likes to delegate, and that's what he indicated, I want to delegate, I'm not going to micromanage. He said it differently, but that's what he's saying. Then you have to have people that you trust. And because this government is so vast, that's a lot of people.
It's a ton of people.
Yeah,
and I don't know.
It's a challenge. And I think until you're actually there, and not to discredit Brent or his ideas in any way, until you're actually there and just realize how damn big it is and how small you are.
Well, and one of the questions I was hoping he would have tackled a little bit a little bit better, I guess, was the question of, okay, so how are you going to work with all these people? And what I was driving at is there's a difference between running a military base when you're the top dog and being the governor, and you've got to work with all these people that some of whom are just diametrically opposed.
He did answer that, if you understand the military like I do, because he talked about discipline, and that discipline is key. It's necessary when you have that kind of situation. That's why, if you're in a combat situation and leadership is taken out immediately and somebody else steps up, you have to have that discipline already instilled, because you don't have the time for the people to build that trust in you. And quite frankly, if you got 4 years or 8 years as a governor, you don't have the time to earn that trust.
Nope.
And that's part of the problem that we're coming to. So I understand his concepts. I think he's on the right idea. But until you've been there, you don't know. And we've said that about a number of things, including combat. And politics is combat.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's maybe not a full contact sport, but it darn well ought to be.
Pretty much.
All right. Well, I know we're a little bit early this morning, but we've pretty much gone full circle around this whole thing. We'll be back tomorrow for Open Line Friday. Make sure that you don't miss it. We'll have the phone lines open the entire program long. But for now, from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio, I'm David Iverson, and this is